This is the Tudors, Dynasty, and Beyond podcast. History with a twist. And now your host, Rebecca Larson.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rebecca Larson, and I am joined again by my good friend, Sharon Bennett Connolly. Welcome.
Hello, Rebecca. Thank you for having me back.
Well, of course. Yeah, I was like, I'm really kind of on a medieval streak right now with the podcast in general. So I'm excited that your new book, I think it came out, Princesses, I always have a hard time with this, Princesses of the Early Middle Ages. Is it out now?
It came out in the UK in April and it's due out in the US at the end of the month. So
Yes.
A couple more weeks and you should be getting the copies.
Wonderful. And if you haven't yet ordered it, I'm going to highly recommend already that you order this book and all of Sharon's books because they're all absolutely wonderful. But today I was like, which topic should we talk about? There are so many women in this book, and I wanted to really focus today on the illegitimate daughters of Henry I. And you were not surprised at all, were you?
I wasn't, no. Well, I know you've been talking with Matthew about Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine's daughters, so I thought, well, that's out. And I think you've been talking with him about John's daughters as well. And we've already mentioned Gunhild and Githa,
Yes.
Harold II's daughters. So we're narrowing it down. And then I actually like the idea of Henry I's daughters. They weren't, originally, I was like, well, I can't put them in because they're not princesses. But they play a really significant role in Henry's domestic and foreign policies. So it's like, I've got to put them in. And they are, I mean, okay, so one of them tries to kill her dad. And it's like, of course you're going to go with that, aren't you?
Okay, I like how you just said that so like in passing. So one of them tried to kill her dad. So what?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't do that all the time. So you have to, it's one of the main reasons I wanted to put them in the book. It's like, I've got to cover them because she tried to kill her dad.
Okay, well, let's be fair. Her dad was not an innocent. Her dad, no. He is like the one where I look at him and I go, I don't know if I really like him or not. And it all starts in the forest, with him. When he left his dead brother in the forest and went and claimed the throne for himself. That's when I was like, yeah, I don't know about you.
Yeah. Although to be fair to Henry I, I think if it had been the other way around, there was no love lost between any of those brothers. And a lot of me thinks that it was his relationship with his brothers that made Henry decide that one legitimate son was enough. I mean, it caused problems in the end because that son dies. But the idea of not having that sibling rivalry in the claim to the throne must have been very appealing, considering his relationship with Robert, Duke of Normandy, and William II of England. It's like, yeah, I can understand. I can understand him just going, right, that's it. One son, that's enough.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. So are you telling me that you think that's the reason why he had so many illegitimate children?
I do. I think he saw the idea of illegitimate children. Everybody else sees them as a hindrance or an embarrassment. And I think Henry saw them as useful tools to create familial relationships with powerful neighbours like the kings of Scotland and the dukes of Brittany, but also with his own vassals, drawing them into his family, but with one really important caveat. There is no claim to the throne. So he brings all these people into the family, his grandfather to God knows how many children in the end. But not one of them, except Empress Matilda's children, has a claim to the throne. So there's no sibling rivalry for the throne, So Empress Matilda gets all this support. And you do see it. She gets tons of support from her illegitimate siblings. Robert of Gloucester, the oldest of them, is her leading general. Reginald de Dunstanville is another one who takes Empress Matilda's side really quickly. Sister Matilda, who is an abbess, is another strong supporter of the Empress, but not one of them can claim the throne.
Yeah.
So they can throw their lot in behind the Empress, and she knows that she can trust them because there's nothing in it for them.
I just can't even imagine having that many half siblings.
Well, at least, I think 3 of them were named Matilda, so you don't have to remember all their names.
This is always, every time I have you on the show, this is the problem that we have. They're all named the same thing and impossible to keep apart.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we get too into these daughters, for those who are just tuning in, maybe this is their first time watching the show, maybe it's their first time seeing you talk about who these women are. Let's first just do a really quick recap about the legitimate children of Henry I, and then we'll get into these daughters.
Yeah. Well, Henry I became king in 1100, and shortly after becoming king, he married Edith of Scotland, who very inconveniently changed her name to Matilda on marriage. And I say inconvenient because Henry's mum was called Matilda, Henry's sister was called Matilda, Henry's daughter was called Matilda, and now Henry's wife was called Matilda. You get there's a lot of Matildas. So Edith changes her name to Matilda, and he's like, oh, good, another one. And Matilda and Henry have 2 children. The eldest is Matilda.
Of course.
Go again. Who marries Henry V, the Holy Roman Emperor, and becomes Empress Matilda and Holy Roman Empress. The second child is a son, William, known as William the Atheling or William Adeline, as a reflection of the Anglo-Saxon tradition of naming Atheling basically means throne worthy, that he's in line for the throne. And it was, I think the idea was to try and get this habit of making the eldest son the heir to the throne and calling him Atheling to identify him as such. But it didn't catch on, to be honest. William's the only one out of the Norman princes who is ever called William Atheling, until we have the title of Prince of Wales in the reign of Edward I for the future Edward II. We don't really have... Earl of Chester, I think, was another title that was given to the eldest son, usually. But again, that wasn't until Edward II's reign. So there wasn't, except for Atheling with William, there wasn't an identifier for the oldest legitimate son. And I suppose when you think about it as well, Henry II had Henry the Young King. They've been trying to find an identifier until they finally settled on Prince of Wales. They were all looking for one.
It wasn't until Edward I went into Wales and took it over that they were like, okay, this is what we're going to settle on now.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of it before, but yeah, it's like they tried out a few.
The only one stuck, that was the Prince of Wales.
Yeah. So William was the son and heir, the apple of his father's eye. Unfortunately, he died in 1120 in the sinking of the White Ship, which was basically... this chap named Fitzstephen came up to the King of England and said... who was returning from Normandy to England, and said, I've got the fastest ship on the ocean, and come and use it. And the king said, no, I've already booked my passage. I'm going on this ship, and that's that. And William went, oh, as 16-year-old boys do, oh, really fast ship, I'll take it.
Okay. Yeah.
And he and 300 of his best friends all climbed aboard this ship and were partying still and merrily having a drink, and broached another barrel of wine and passed it around to the rowers and the helmsman, so that everybody was partying and celebrating. Let the king have a head start, leaving harbour, watching his ship go, and it's like, it's okay, we'll catch up because we've got the fastest ship. So they finally leave about midnight, and of course everybody's drunk and nobody remembers that there's this massive great boulder in the middle of the harbour that they're supposed to steer around.
Right. That they know is there.
Yeah, they all know it's there. You can see it when the tide's out. You can see it. It's covered up when the tide's in, but they do know more or less where it is, even when it's covered up, because it's always there. But apparently, when you're drunk, you don't think about things like that, so they just rode right into it, and the boulder breached the planks of the ship. The ship took in water very quickly and very quickly keeled over and sank. Luckily, they managed to get the Prince William into a rowing boat. Apparently, there was only one boat, one lifeboat for the whole ship, 300 crew, one lifeboat. They got the prince into a lifeboat and started rowing him back to shore. And he is said to have been able to hear the screams of his sister, Matilda, Countess of Perche, who was one of the illegitimate daughters of Henry I, screaming for him to come back and help her. So he had the rowers turn around and go and rescue her. Except everybody in the water now sees this rowing boat coming and tries to get in it. So just the mass of people trying to get in this boat brings the boat down and the prince as well. To be fair, I can understand how come Matilda, Countess of Perche, was screaming and petrified. When you think, yes, very few of them would have been able to swim. Swimming was a poor man's pastime rather than a rich man's pastime. But also, every woman on that ship, and I think there were about 18 women, it's November. They would have been in layers of clothing, with their dresses, their underskirts, their veils. As soon as they were in their water, those clothes, woolen clothes, would have got heavy and waterlogged and would have dragged them down. They stood no chance. So I can understand the screams and the fear, and I can understand William wanting to rescue his sister. But as a result, he lost his life as well. And in fact, the only one who survived was a butcher who had joined the ship because he was following somebody who still owed him money. And he was the only one who managed to survive, apparently, clinging to a spar. So it was an absolute disaster, and it was so horrendously bad a disaster that nobody dare tell Henry, even when they knew what had happened. It was like, I'm not telling the king, or I'm not telling him, I'm not telling him. And in the end, they sent a little boy, an 9-year-old boy, in to tell the king what had happened because they were so scared of his anger and despair that they just didn't want to tell him.
The whole thing is so tragic. And I just have to say, it's like it makes you wonder if the builders of the Titanic knew of the white ship tragedy. Did they know of it? Because if they would have, would they have said it was unsinkable, thinking back to it being the white ship being the fastest ship?
Yeah,
that didn't turn out so well for them.
I mean, to be honest, if I went on any boat and anyone claimed it's unsinkable or it's the fastest, I'd go, right, I'm getting the next one. No.
I need a refund on my ticket, please.
No. Yeah, exactly. You make a claim like that, you're heading for disaster. Oh, yeah, sure, of course you are. No, honest, you're heading for disaster. White ship, Titanic. Yeah, no.
Yes, exactly. Oh, my gosh. There was one story that you talked about when it came to the white ship tragedy was that, let me see if I get this right. There was an illegitimate son that was on the boat who drowned and was found later, but it was difficult to identify.
Yeah, Richard of Lincoln, who was an illegitimate son of Henry I, was also on the boat, and he was one of the very few bodies that was recovered. Apparently, his face was all bloated from the water, and they identified him by his clothing.
I know that was very
So,
morbid for me to bring up, but I just thought that was an interesting little
yeah,
part of
it's
the
just
story.
hard to believe, there were over 300 people on that ship and they found about 20 or 30 bodies. That was it. Everybody else was lost and never recovered. And I suppose for Henry, at least, with Richard of Lincoln being identified, he had somebody to bury. I mean, losing 3 children in that disaster and a niece, his sister Adela's daughter, also called Matilda, died
Yeah.
in the disaster as well.
And that
So,
was like his favorite niece, right?
mm,
Yeah.
I mean, the one person who didn't die in the disaster was the future King Stephen, because he had a tummy ache or something and got off the ship. And it's like, oh God, if the just if only. I'm not a fan of Stephen.
You know what? After talking to Matt, my whole thought of Stephen really changed a lot after we did I think it was a Matilda and Stephen episode. And I think
Mm.
I look at him in a different way, and I'm sure you've heard Matt talk about him before, but I feel like I don't know. I don't know if I dislike Henry the First more or Stephen more.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Stephen. I just like he was like, he swore twice that he would uphold Empress Matilda's claim to the throne. And when it actually came to it, he was already organized and planning things way before Henry I's death. And to be fair, Henry I bears some responsibility for that because he, until Empress Matilda returned from Germany, he was grooming Stephen for the throne. He was giving him a rich heiress, a county, the county of Boulogne, to administer and get the hang of ruling. And then Empress Matilda comes back and it's like, oh, actually, Stephen, stuff you. I've got my own daughter who can have the throne. So I
Yeah.
can get why Stephen thought that, he should have had it. But at the same time, he swore twice that he would support Empress Matilda's claim to the throne. And when it came to it, he didn't.
Hmm.
And then he brought up a really old scandal that had been put to bed within the first year of Henry's reign to try and discredit Empress Matilda. So, no, I have no sympathy for Stephen. Basically, before Matilda of Scotland married Henry, she was in a convent, and there was a question as to whether or not she'd taken holy vows. She swore she hadn't. The church claimed she had, so they had a whole investigation and a court case, and Archbishop Anselm of Canterbury ruled that she hadn't and that her marriage to Henry was valid. And then Stephen brings this up again and claims that Empress Matilda is illegitimate because her mother had taken holy vows when she hadn't. So, yeah,
All right,
not a
so
fan
you
of
don't. I
Stephen.
was just gonna say, all right, so you don't like Steven. Well, thank you for that little recap because I just wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page before we got into these other daughters. Of course, I want to start from the beginning, just like you did in your chapter. Let's start with Sybilla, I assume is how you
Mm.
pronounce her name. I think she is the one who's considered the eldest of the illegitimate daughters.
I think so. I mean, to be fair, we don't know because we don't actually have any dates of birth. So, because she was married to a king, that suggests she might be the eldest. But at the same time, two of her sisters were already married by the time, at least two of her sisters were already married by the time she married Alexander I of Scots. So, I don't know. I cannot say who was the eldest for definite. She went first because she might be the eldest, but also because technically she's the most senior because she became a queen,
Okay.
whereas the others became countesses and ladies. She actually, I mean, for an illegitimate daughter to become a queen is quite impressive.
It is. Yeah, let's talk about that because I mean, it seems like obvious when I ask this, but what was the purpose of wedding her to Alexander the First, and what kind of marriage did they have?
Well, the idea was if she married Alexander I, then it would improve relations, which were already pretty impressive between England and Scotland. You know, Henry I had married Alexander's sister, and so he became Alexander's father-in-law and brother-in-law.
Yeah. That's not weird.
Yeah, which awkward. Well, I suppose it's only one place sitting at dinner, isn't it?
Oh, that's true.
Instead of two. Yeah. You're saving on having to feed so many people. It was to ease tensions on the border, to improve relations between the Scots and the English, to bind Alexander I even closer to the Scottish throne, to the English throne, sorry, in that, you know, he's already brother-in-law, he's now son-in-law of Henry I. And it's funny, they married probably in 1107, 1108, and then in 1114, Alexander's fighting in Wales with Henry I. So, he's made himself a good ally there.
Yeah. And just before you continue, it's so interesting to me that he had no issue marrying the illegitimate daughter of the King of England.
Yeah, we have this view of Scottish kings as being equivalent to English kings. Medieval times, that wasn't the case. English kings of England, viewed themselves as overlords of kings of Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of Alexander I, a king of Scots, marrying even the illegitimate daughter of Henry I, Henry was showing his benevolence by giving Alexander one of his daughters. The fact that they married in 1107, 1108, when Henry I also had a legitimate daughter who wasn't actually quite married just yet, in the future Empress Matilda, suggests that he wanted to give Alexander a daughter, but not his prize daughter, because Alexander already owed allegiance to Henry I. He didn't have to have the prize jewel. And Empress Matilda, the future empress, his legitimate daughter, she was a jewel. She was going to be the one who made the super duper magnificent alliance that would improve Henry's position in Europe. Marrying his daughter to a King of Scots didn't improve Henry's position in Europe. It improved the King of Scots' position.
Yeah.
So there is, even among kings, there's this hierarchy of who owes allegiance elsewhere and who owes, who's the stronger king. Like the kings of England were anointed with oil and then crowned. So they had a full coronation ceremony. The kings of Scotland had an inauguration ceremony. They were crowned, but they were not anointed with holy oil until David II, the son of Robert the Bruce.
Interesting.
And it was, I think it was from Alexander I onwards where they started petitioning the king, included an anointing with holy oil. But that wasn't, the English kings always sent in an objection to the Pope. It was like, no, we're the higher king, we're the ones with that prestige. We don't want that being handed out willy-nilly to kings who are lesser than the English kings. I'm not having you putting those Scottish kings on an equal footing. That's not fair. So, even when relations between England and Scotland were good, like when the reign of Henry III, when his daughter was married to Alexander III of Scots, he was still insisting, Henry III was still insisting that there's no anointing in Scotland. That's reserved for the English kings.
Yeah.
We're the better ones.
Yeah, of course. Let's talk about the marriage between Sybilla and Alexander the First, because I feel like from reading the chapter that there was maybe two different stories about what kind of marriage they were or they had or what kind of woman she was. And I especially was intrigued by the whole appearance thing, maybe, or how she was
Yeah,
described.
there's this horrible chap. I say horrible chap. William of Malmesbury was quite nice to Empress Matilda, but he was not so nice to Sybilla of Normandy. And he actually calls her. What is it? Where is it? I've actually got the book out so that I get it right. So he says that there was some defect about the lady, either in correctness of manners or elegance of person. And he said that Alexander did not sigh much when she died before him, for the woman lacked, as he said, what was desired, either in modest manners or in elegant body. I mean, he basically said, "What? She was ugly and smelled."
Yeah, it's not a very nice description of her, is it? Like hearing that, and when I was reading it, I thought, wow, this is really a biased opinion of a person.
Yes. And the theory is that he was writing that because Alexander's brother, younger brother David, was the next king of Scotland, David the First, who was uncle to Empress Matilda and to Robert of Gloucester. And Robert of Gloucester is the chap who financed William of Malmesbury. And it seems that Malmesbury might have been trying to find favour with David, looking to the future reign, rather than with Alexander. And yeah, but he wasn't very complimentary to Sybilla at all. And and he says that Alexander, what was it? He didn't weep when he lost her. He didn't sigh much when she died, and it's like actually Alexander did. He founded a chantry chapel for her. She and Sybilla and Alexander appear to have been happy. He didn't annul the marriage when they didn't have children, which is always a sign that he thought, being married to her was enough. Might also have been a sign that he didn't want to upset his father-in-law, the all-powerful Henry I, who was not averse to taking revenge on people. So, but yeah, he didn't set her aside. He stayed with her until her death, and he didn't remarry after she died. So it's he seems to have resigned himself to not having a son of his own and to his brother inheriting the throne from him, even though he and his brother didn't get on very well. David had more or less grown up at the English court rather than at the Scottish court, so they were quite estranged when David acceded to the throne in 1124. So yeah, but it's that thing we have about medieval women that we don't, and I think I mentioned it in the conclusion of the book, that we have stories of them. We have some, and we know about their actions in Sybilla and Alexander the First co-founded Scone Abbey. I think it was co-founded Scone Abbey because Scone Abbey was already there, but they gave it a load of money, so they co-founded it again. But we don't have Sybilla's voice. We never have the voices of these women. And everybody who writes about them, because it was medieval times, it's invariably the men. So we always have this slanted view of what these women were like, what they looked like.
Yeah.
And of course, the men, William of Malmesbury, who's writing about Sybilla and being really nasty about her, he's a churchman, he's a monk. So what would he know anyway?
Well, you mentioned like there's not too much we know, and I think like one of the things is like, what do we know anything about her time as Queen of Scotland, or does she just kind of disappear into the records?
We know very little like I said, we believe they were. I think they were probably happy because, like I say, Alexander didn't try to discard her when they had no children. He founded a chantry chapel after she died, didn't remarry, which is always a good indication that he was happy. And they did do few things together, like I say, founding Scone Abbey and making joint offerings to the church at the cathedral at St Andrews. And Sybilla herself made ecclesiastical grants in her own name, gave manors to Dunfermline Abbey and things like that. She fulfilled the traditional role of a queen, being supporting the church, offering benefices and patronage. And as far as we can tell, by all accounts, their court in Scotland was a very extravagant court. You know, it was a splendid court. It wasn't. Sometimes you read about Scottish courts where it's like, oh, they were still in the Dark Ages, but a lot of people suggest that, and it's like, no, it was, you know, they patronised the arts, fashion, welcomed nobles, welcomed diplomats and things. So they were very progressive, very attractive court with a king and queen who, so obviously, unless you're William of Malmesbury, appear to have actually liked each other.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that it's funny that you say that because Scotland does kind of get the reputation of being, like you said, kind of in the dark ages, not up with the times, not celebrating, nothing like the English court.
yeah, but no, they were, and they had been. Saint Margaret, the wife of Malcolm III, Alexander the First's mother, was also very active in politics, in religion, and in advancing the Scottish court. And she'd been born in Hungary, so she had a very European outlook. So she'd modernised the court and encouraged court festivities and things. And Sybilla did the same, and she also acted as peacemaker, and there was this very big controversy throughout Europe called the investiture controversy, which was basically a clash between kings and the Pope as to who had the right to decide who was going to be bishop and archbishop and abbots within the individual lands in England, in Scotland, in Germany. And the kings wanted to be able to decide who was going to be their archbishops, because archbishop wasn't just a church position, it was a political position as well. So kings wanted to be able to work with the person who was appointed archbishop, and they were claiming the right to appoint their choices, whereas the Pope was saying, no, this is a reserve of the church. So there was this big, and it went on for years and years, where there was this discussion as to who decided who was archbishop, bishop, who got these prelates, but who was the prelate, whether it was the king's choice or the Pope's choice. And in Scotland, it was Sybilla herself who seems to have brokered a peace between the Bishop of St Andrews, who's the leading churchman in Scotland, and the King of Scots. And they sort of came to a compromise where the sceptre would be handed to the bishop by the king, but the episcopal ring would be put on the altar, and the bishop would take the ring off the altar. So some part of it is he's given his lands that were associated with this position by the king, but his church authority, his ecclesiastical authority, comes from the altar, from the church, rather than from the king. So it's like, king has some say in who becomes bishop, but at the end of the day, his religious authority is given by the church rather than the king.
Yeah.
But it still went on after that. But Sybilla started trying to find a way through it.
Did Sybilla have any brothers, like 100% biological brothers?
We think so. If she was, I mean, the thing is, we're not exactly certain who her mother is. It's assumed that her mother is Sybilla Corbett because she's got the same name. And
Yeah, yeah.
many girls were often named after their mother. So, other than her having the same name, there's one other bit that suggests that she's the daughter of Sybilla Corbett, which is Sybilla Corbett's one of Sybilla's sons accompanied Queen Sybilla to Scotland, and he's described as the brother of the Queen.
There you go.
So it suggests that yes, they are full siblings, but they might, if Sybilla isn't Sybilla's mum, sorry about the confusion with the Sybillas, then he would still be the brother of the Queen if he was the son of Henry I, just like Sybilla was.
Right.
So
yeah.
you have to remember, this is 800 years ago. So we still, a lot of it, actually 900 years ago, isn't it? Because 900 years ago. So things are a tad vague.
Yeah, it's a little bit more difficult.
You have to make some suppositions. And like I said, there's some things like, oh, they shared the mother, Sybilla Corbett might have had a daughter named Sybilla of Normandy. So it seems likely that she's her daughter because they share the same name. But then again, Henry could have had another mistress called Sybilla as well.
True.
You know?
Yeah, very, very true. Okay, now that we've talked about Sybilla, I feel like she was the big one to talk about. Can we go to Matilda of Normandy? I'm gonna make sure I get these right. Okay, let's talk about her.
Is she the one that married
Conan?
Brittany? Count of
Yes,
Brittany, is that the one we're talking about? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Or are we talking about the one who married the Count of Perche?
Let's talk about Brittany.
Brittany. Yeah, that was an interesting one because this poor girl, she marries the Count of Brittany. She seems to, I'm saying poor girl, but she seems to have had, there's not a lot about her. She did have children, 3 children, I think it was, and before she died. And you don't hear anything, there's nothing, untoward about the relationship with the Duke of Brittany or anything. It just seems to have been they had children, so they obviously got on to some extent.
Yeah.
It's only when the Duke of Brittany dies that you think that there might have been something a bit iffy in the relationship, because he disinherits his eldest son, claiming that he's illegitimate. So
what?
And there's no mention of this beforehand. He didn't not recognize his son when he was born or anything like that. And his wife, Matilda, Henry I's daughter, has been dead a few years by this point, so she can't stand up for herself.
Yeah.
But there's nothing from when she was alive suggesting that the Duke of Brittany, Conan, his name was. There's nothing when Matilda was alive suggesting that he was questioning this child's parenthood. And he was born something like, I think they were married about 1112, 1113. Yeah, there was a charter dated 1112 where she's named as Conan's wife. And this child was born 1115 or 1116, so early in the marriage.
Yeah.
So it's not like she's got bored and strayed.
So let me ask you this. Did he remarry at the time when he started claiming that the son was illegitimate? Like, did he have a new wife that he wanted to legitimize those children?
Not as far as I know, I don't think so.
Yeah.
He he just decided that Howell, his name wasn't going to be Duke, but did make him Count of Nantes instead. And he passed the duchy to his daughter Bertha, who,
This is
of course,
interesting.
as a result of her being a woman, she couldn't actually rule the duchy in her own name, in her own right. So she had been married to the first husband. She was married twice, and she was married to Alan de Pontievre first, but he died before she became Duchess. So she married again. And a chap named Odo. But she'd had 3 children with her first husband. So when she died, it was the children from her first son from her first husband who inherited, who was Conan the Fourth. Now, Conan the Fourth, just to give you an idea of where we are in genealogies, he was the father of Constance of Brittany, who married Geoffrey, the son of Henry II.
Oh, okay.
So he would be the grandfather of Arthur, Duke of Brittany, who was murdered by King John.
Right. Oh gosh, here we go.
So Conan was the son of Bertha, and he was the one who inherited the duchy after his mother. But Odo, his stepfather, was perturbed, to say the least, and tried to dethrone Conan by putting Conan's uncle, the previously disinherited Howell, giving him the duchy. But Howell was actually fighting a rebellion in Nantes at the time and didn't have time to actually come and grab Brittany. So Conan won it in the end anyway. But it's like this, you couldn't make this up.
Yeah, there's so much drama, isn't there? These women are so interesting to me as illegitimate daughters of a king, and it seems like most of them made really good marriages. Let's shift. You mentioned earlier that he had a daughter who tried to kill him, so I think we need to go to that story.
You're saving the best to last, aren't you?
Yes, ma'am.
Juliana. Depends which book you read. It's just in those days spelling wasn't so formalized, so the names change when you're reading them, and you, as a writer, you have to remember what you decided to call her
and stick with it, right?
I settled on Julianne, and then suddenly started calling her Juliana, and it's like, oh God, Sharon, make your mind up. So Julianne was the daughter, possibly through a mistress of Henry I named Ansfrida, who was the widow of Anskill, who was a knight of Abingdon Abbey. And Ansfrida had 3 children by Henry, including Richard of Lincoln, who was the illegitimate son who died on the White Ship. Now, we think Richard of Lincoln was Julianne's full brother because he actually interceded with Henry when Julianne got into trouble with her dad. So it looks like he looked out for his sister, and they were of a very close in age. But then again, it might be that they were brought up together because their mothers were pregnant at about the same time. Who knows? And unfortunately, there are some things that aren't as clear as other things. So she was married in about 1102. She was married at the same time as her sister, who became Countess of Perche, I think it was. And she, believe it or not, Julianne was married to an illegitimate son. So I think she's the only one who was actually married to someone else who was illegitimate. But Eustace de Passy, her husband, was an heir to, even though he was illegitimate, he was his father's only son. and his father, William de Bretuis, possibly, technically, may have left Bretuis to his son, or he may have left it to a nephew.
There's so much uncertainty, isn't there?
But basically, the son Eustace de Passy claimed it, but then again, so did the nephew, William de Gale. So you can see what's coming, a civil war with Henry I taking sides. Now, the war things became a bit tetchy. And Eustace came to an agreement with Henry I about, it was one of the cities. Which one was it? There was an exchange of hostages to guarantee good behaviour on both sides. And another Lord, Harenc, gave his son to Eustace and Juliana as a hostage, whilst Eustace and Juliana gave their 2 daughters, whose names we don't even know, we just know there were 2 daughters, to Henry I to hold as hostages for their good behaviour. So they've got Harenc's son to guarantee his good behaviour, and Henry I has got their daughters to guarantee their good behaviour. For some reason, and we don't know why, which is really annoying, Eustace and Juliana take it upon themselves to blind the boy hostage that they're holding, to basically mutilate him and send him back to his father, blinded. His father, of course, Harenc, goes to Henry I and demands justice. He says, they blinded my son.
Yeah.
I demand justice. You've got their daughters as hostage for good behaviour. That is not good behaviour.
It is not.
So Henry I hands over his 2 daughters to Harenc to deal with as he pleases, because in revenge for what Juliana and Eustace have done to his son. So in a lot of when I first heard about this, I heard it as Henry I blinded his own granddaughters. He didn't. They were in his custody, but then he handed them to Harenc because of what Eustace and Juliana had done to Harenc's son. So he then puts out the eyes of these 2 little girls and cuts off their noses, basically disfiguring them and making them, I would have thought, unmarriageable,
That's terrible.
It is. It's horrendous. The girls were just like the boy. All 3 of the children were innocents.
Yeah.
And the idea of adults doing that. And I assumed that Eustace and Juliana thought, well, it's okay, we can do it, because your dad's never going to hand over his own granddaughters. He's not going to let the revenge be taken. And of course, Henry I thinking, well, you think you know me, do you? Well, that's not going to happen. Because they've basically disrespected Henry I by mutilating a hostage that they're supposed to be taking care of, and it's actually it does suggest that Henry hasn't got control of his own daughter. If they can do that, then what is somebody else going to do? This is how rebellions start. They see a king is looking weak and all hell breaks loose. So Henry's got to look strong. He's got to appear that it doesn't matter that Juliana's his daughter. She's disobeyed him. So he has to allow, justice to take its course. So it does. And eventually, Eustace and Juliana are in open rebellion. And Juliana's in, I think it was Bretuis, in the city of Bretuis, in the castle, and her father comes and besieges the castle while she's in it. And well, before that, she's had a meeting with her dad. she actually shoots at him with a crossbow, misses, but he's well peed off. She runs back into Bretuis, and he surrounds it, burns the drawbridge so she can't get out, and just, he's besieging the castle, ready to take it. And she, in order to get out, she actually jumps into the moat in February in the freezing cold. Apparently, according to Audric Vitalis, the chronicler, with her buttocks showing because her skirts have risen up so high. It's like, right, it's another monk. These chroniclers are all monks.
Yeah.
Concentrating on women's buttocks and things. And says that she somehow manages to get out of the moat with none of her dignity intact. She as indecorous as necessary to get out of the moat, and makes her way to her husband. And the thing is, in those days, rebellion was part of the course, basically. It happened. When you think in the 15th century, if Eustace and Juliana had rebelled like that in the 15th century, Eustace would have lost his head, and Juliana would have probably been put in prison for the rest of her life. Things didn't happen like that in the 12th century. They eventually made peace with Henry I. Eustace had to stay by Henry's side for a good few months to prove that he was loyal and wouldn't rebel again. And they lost lands. They were punished by the loss of lands and finances, but they were reconciled. So it wasn't, even trying to kill your dad. It's like, okay, I do forgive you eventually, but I'm not happy.
What a story. Like, there's so many twists and turns, so many shocking events. I just can't, I'm hung up on blinding those two girls and cutting off their noses.
Yeah, and you know what I find really annoying? I could not find what happened to them.
Wow.
I assumed they lived. I would have thought, Julian, after Eustace died, Julian retired to a monastery, to a convent. Oh. And I assumed that that's what happened to the little girls. I assumed that once they had been mutilated like that, they were sent to be cared for at a convent.
Yeah,
for their injuries to be cared for, and then would have joined a contemplative life, because who's going to want to marry them in a world where looks weren't important, but they were, there's no mention of any lord with a wife who was blind and had no nose. So I don't think they were married.
Yeah, you'd have to think with them being blinded, like a convent would have been the best place for them, where people could care for them. When you're sighted and then you suddenly become blind, you're going to have to really adapt to a new life where you can't see. And I don't even know what it would be like to have your nose cut off. Like, what would that do to you?
I don't know. It's like that somebody could do that to two little girls. It's just
brutal.
Blinding children anyway. I understand the concept behind blinding a boy or a man is that they are no longer fit to rule if they don't have their eyesight. But to do it to girls, it's like, especially chopping off their noses. It's like, well, they're so ugly now, no one's going to want to marry them. So you lose alliances if you can't marry your daughters off, don't you? So I suppose it's there is a purpose to it, but it's just so ruthless.
It is.
Julianne started it.